Have you ever, I don't even want to do show of hands, just think to yourself, you ever had one of those times where somebody said something or did something, said something to you, said something about you, did something to you, just made you feel bad about yourself? And not just, sometimes people say things or do things that just make us feel bad, but truly feel like I'm not good at blank, or I'm not a good person, or I'm not worth all that much. I would venture to guess that most of us have had situations like that. Now, a lot of us have, the skills, the ability to dismiss those things or work past them, move past them, kind of brush those things off. But sometimes it can be pretty hurtful. And sometimes those things stick with us. And we have situations like that. I've shared with this church family before. That I had a basketball coach when I was in junior high that told me to stop shooting the ball. That I wasn't a shooter. So you know what? The rest of my junior high and high school career, never shot the ball. Why? Because he told me I wasn't a shooter. And it made me feel like I'm not good at shooting the basketball. I fulfilled what it was that he said about me because it made me feel bad. That's just one example. There's other times that people have said something to me or said something about me, and it just makes me feel like, man, I'm really not worth that much, at least not in that person's eyes. And I hate to say this, but I'll confess to you, I've made other people feel that way too. I've said things to people and been really hurtful. And honestly, sometimes probably intentionally, because it was going to get a good laugh. It was going to make me more popular. It was going to make people like me more at the expense of somebody else. You ever been there? I bet a lot of us have. We started talking last week about red flags. We started talking about these warning signs that we encounter at different times in our lives for a variety of different reasons. We see something and that's a red flag. That's a warning that we shouldn't do that anymore. We shouldn't go that direction. We shouldn't be around those people. We shouldn't try that food. And I probably need to clarify. I went back and watched a little bit of last week's worship time to make sure that I said things correctly, because I had a couple of people, just kind of bring up how I saw certain people in certain categories as red flags. And I want to clarify that I said this was on the internet, and people on the internet said to watch out for these people. For example, Reagan got up at the end of worship last week and said, well, me and my family, we wear Crocs. We're a Croc-wearing family. I didn't say that you should not be around Reagan Price and his family. I just said people on the internet say Croc wearers, that's a red flag. Croc wearers for all sorts of occasions, I guess I should say. I've also been challenged with speaking up about pineapple on pizza. I am not against people who put pineapple on pizza. I have indulged in that food myself. I'm not against it. Although some of you are and think those people should be punished severely for doing that. But we have these warning signs, these red flags, right? We started talking about that last week. And not just about people, but about situations in our lives. And specifically about relationships. Where there's a family relationship, somebody that I'm dating, my spouse, a coworker, a neighbor, a friend. If there's things that are happening in this particular relationship that are negative or could potentially cause problems, I need to pay attention to the warning signs so that I can deal with that in that relationship in a healthy way. Or I can at least be prepared to do something different, maybe even be done with that relationship so that I can take care of my mental and emotional health as well. So we started talking about that last week. What are some of the warning signs that we see in relationships, and how do we deal with some of those? And we're going to be a little bit more specific today and talk about the red flag. The red flag, it's too long a word, or too long a phrase, but I couldn't think of a way to condense it down. When someone is hurting my self-esteem, when someone is damaging the way I see, the way I view myself, when someone that I'm in a relationship with is doing that, whether that's a family member, whether that's a friend, a coworker, when someone else is hurting the way I see me and the way I view myself, that's a red flag. Now, I want to clarify a little bit more on this. I'm talking about somebody that does this on a consistent basis. Someone who I am in connection with, who is consistently saying things and doing things and treating me in certain ways that cause me to feel less about myself and view myself as to be more insignificant, less important, less valued than other people. That's a red flag. That's a warning sign that something is wrong with this relationship, that something needs to be addressed. And if this person is consistently treating me bad or saying negative things to me and causing me to feel less valued, that's a warning sign. And for some, maybe most of us are sitting here, when you hear me say that, you're probably like, well, duh, yeah, it is. That's a warning sign. That's a red flag. Somebody makes me feel bad, red flag. Might want to do something about that relationship. It seems like common sense, and yet so many of us, myself included, will choose to ignore that red flag. We'll choose to pretend that it's not there, or we'll choose to pretend that it's not that big a deal, or we'll even justify and say, that's just the way they are. That's just the way they've always been. That's just how they act. Those are just the things that they say. And we justify it, and we rationalize, and we dismiss it. And just like a red flag in life, if somebody is warning you, hey, there's a train coming with a red flag, and you say, that's not that big a deal, that's going to be a problem when you try to go across the tracks. Same thing in our relationships. When someone has consistently caused me to feel less valued, and I try to dismiss that and say it's not that big a deal, there's going to end up being a problem. When we're talking about this, this red flag, what should I be looking for? How does this person cause me to feel less valued? There's a variety of ways that happens. And some of the more common ones are for example, insults. If my friend is constantly insulting me, talking about my weight or how I look or my job performance or my lack of intelligence or whatever it is, to the point that I start actually believing them and seeing myself through those comments, that's a red flag. If my spouse is constantly insulting me, especially in front of other people, that's a red flag. If this person that I'm friends with is in the habit of saying hurtful things to me and then quickly following it up with, I was just kidding. I was only joking. God, don't make such a big deal out of it. It's a red flag. When I hear those comments, when I hear them enough, those negative things about me, it has an effect on how I begin to view myself. I start to buy into that perception. I start to believe those things about myself. I start having self-doubt, and I start becoming whatever it is that you say that I am. And if I'm in a relationship with someone whose words are changing the way I feel about myself, someone who's constantly saying negative things to me or about me, and it's changed the way I feel about myself, something needs to be addressed. That's a warning sign. That's a red flag in that relationship. Another red flag is passive aggressiveness. Attacking someone, but in a non-aggressive way, almost in a backhanded way. And this can happen in a couple of different ways. But instead of if we're going to have a confrontation, if we're going to have an argument about something, if we're just disagreeing on something, then a passive-aggressive person will handle that conflict. Instead of having the actual conversation, the confrontation face-to-face, will either do one of two things. One thing is they do silent treatment. And when you say, what's wrong, or let's talk about this, no, nothing's fine, everything's fine. What's wrong? Nothing. Something, but as long as they don't talk about it, then you just have to sit there and wonder what the problem is. And then you start feeling bad about yourself because you feel like you should know what it is, but you don't know. It's a red flag. Or they can make comments like this. You actually loaded the dishwasher. I'm surprised. Some of you are laughing because that probably got said within the last couple of weeks. You actually look good for a change. Oh, that got some more reaction there. Okay, well, Valentine's Day is in 2 days. Don't use that comment, just so you know. Mark that one off. But someone makes a backhanded comment. It's almost like a compliment, but it's got something negative attached to it. And you hear those things enough, and you start to feel like you are a failure. You do mess up. You don't look good. You always make mistakes. You never quite measure up. And you start to buy into those things. You start to believe those things about yourself. And when someone is constantly being passive-aggressive towards you in this relationship, someone is doing that on a consistent basis, that's a red flag. Something might need to be different in that relationship. Guilt trips, kind of similar to passive-aggressive, but a little bit different. It's not just insults or negative comments, not just kind of backhanded comments, but this is a person who keeps literally bringing up my past failures, who keeps bringing up the mistakes that I've made and won't let go of them and won't let me forget about them. It could also be somebody who just keeps score. Yeah, I made mistakes, but you remember what you did that one time at that one place with those one people, and they may even have it down to the date and what you were wearing in the moment that it happened, but they won't let go of it. They're going to make you feel bad about it. Or they bring up things and say, okay, you did this, but this is what I've done for you. You owe me. And that can happen in friendships. It can happen with coworkers. It can happen in our families and our marriages. And these kinds of comments, these kinds of actions, they obviously cause me to feel bad about myself and to feel like I don't measure up. But it goes so far to make me feel like I won't ever be able to measure up because you're not going to let go of it. You're going to keep bringing these things up. And even if you stop bringing them up, I'm convinced that you're going to keep them in the back of your mind. And I just feel bad because I've got all these failures. I got this list of things of these mistakes I've made, the things that I've done wrong. And I keep focusing on that to the point that that's just who I am. Now I'm a failure. I'm a bad coworker. I'm a bad friend. I'm a bad kid. I'm a bad parent. I don't measure up as a spouse. And if I'm already battling feelings of constant failure, this just starts to make things worse. So if my spouse or the person I'm dating or someone that I'm friends with or coworkers with is consistently trying to make me feel bad about past failures, that's a red flag. That's a warning sign. Something needs to be different. Something needs to be addressed. And these are just some of the ways that we can do this in just how we affect each other in the way that we feel about ourselves, the way that we see ourselves. And the damage can be long-lasting. The damage to our self-esteem can be long-lasting. I need to pay attention to the words that I use and how I treat the people that I'm connected to and in relationships with. And I need to pay attention to how those people are treating me and what their words and their actions towards me are causing me to see about myself. And how those things are causing me to view myself. But when I see that warning sign, when I see that red flag, when I recognize, man, when I am around this person, when they're talking to me, or when they're talking about me, but I can hear them, I'm across the room, but I know I can hear what they're saying. And every time that I'm having that interaction, I feel worse about me. That's a red flag. Okay, I see it. What do I do about it? Because again, so many of us recognize it, we see it, we recognize the effect that it's having on us, but we choose to ignore it. We choose to justify it, we choose to just put our head down and go, well, that's just the way it's going to be, and we keep moving forward and staying connected in that same relationship, and nothing ever changes. So what do we do? And it takes more. I want to give you some action steps this morning because I want us to understand it takes more than just telling myself or allowing somebody else to tell me, just get over it. You'll be fine. And yet that's what I try to convince myself of a lot of times. It's my fault. I just need to be the one to get over it. No, there's more to it than that. So when I see these red flags, when I understand this person that I'm in this relationship is making me feel bad about me, what do? First thing I need to do is I need to remember my God-given value. And I want to repeat that. I need to remember my God-given value. This is not the value that other people put on me. This is not the value that I put on myself. This is the value that God gives me. And when we're talking about value, we're talking about more than just what the price tag is. We're talking about how much it means to a person, how much it's worth to that particular person. You have things in your life that are very valuable to you that probably wouldn't be as valuable to me. And I've got things that are worth a lot to me that wouldn't mean that much to you. If you've ever been in my office, I have a chunk of concrete sitting on one of the shelves in my office. Just a broken piece off a cinder block. That in reality, if you were going to try to sell that, get somebody to buy it, I don't know if it'd be worth a penny. It's just a chunk of broken concrete. But I remember the teenage retreat that I was at when I got that. And I remember the people who were there, and I remember the things that were shared, and I remember the hearts to hearts conversations that we had. That chunk of concrete is precious to me. So I'm the one that gives it value. Does that make sense? It's mine and it means something to me, even if it doesn't to you. I have given it worth. I have given it value. That is what I mean when I talk about our God-given value. That no matter what anybody else thinks of me, or even sometimes what I think of myself, my God considers me to be precious, to be worth so much. I mean, as we read this morning, as we had these babies up here, and we're talking about how precious these babies are to our God, that applies to all of us. When David in Psalm 139 says, you knit me together, you put me together, he's an adult saying those things and recognizing how precious he is to God because God crafted him in the womb. Jesus says in John chapter 3 and verse 16, God loved this world so much that he gave his one and only Son for all of us. You mean so much to God that he sent his one and only Son to the cross to die for you. How much worth do you have in God's eyes? How valuable are you? If he's willing to give that in payment for you. And besides those two things, if that's not enough, look at what Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9. He says, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who calls you out of darkness into his wonderful light. God's special possession, God's prized possession. I belong to the King of the universe. My God looks at me with all my flaws and all the things all the mistakes that I made and the things that I even try to hide and the things I'm disappointed with about myself. And God looks at me in the middle of all this mess and says, that one's mine. And I am so proud. And he does the same thing for you. We have God-given, God-determined value. And I need to constantly remind myself of that. I am precious to him. And I don't ever need to forget that. No matter what anybody else says, no matter what anybody else does, no matter how anybody else tries to make me feel, I have value. I have worth to the Creator of all things. And that means everything. So I need to remember my God-given value. The second thing I need to do is I need to actually communicate with this person how it is they're making me feel. We talked about this a little bit last week, so I won't spend a whole lot of time here today. But I may need to use my words. I may need to have a conversation with this person that I'm dating. I may need to have a conversation with my spouse. I may need to actually say something to my parents. I may need to say something to my kids, to this friend, this coworker, this person that's hurting my self-esteem. I actually need to talk about it. But not in a criticizing way, not to walk up to them and go, you jerk, you're making me feel bad. That's not going to help things. Even though that might honestly be our initial reaction. But to have a conversation, to communicate to this person, hey, these are the things that you said or are saying, and this is how that makes me feel. These are the things that you're doing, and here's what I'm feeling about myself because of that. And quite honestly, there might be some people that have no idea that they're having that kind of effect on you until you say something about it. It may not even be intentional. It may not even be on purpose. But they may be doing some things that are having an impact on me, and I need to be able to communicate that with them. Or it may be intentional, and that may be an issue that needs to be resolved. I need to talk about it with them This is how you're making me feel, whether you're intending to or not. I'm hurting because of this. Jesus told his followers in Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you've gained your brother. Go talk to that person. You have hurt me. Maybe you meant to, maybe you didn't. Let's talk about that. But something needs to be different. And if they listen, Jesus says, awesome, great. Now you have this deeper connection. If not, okay, may need to address it. May need to be done with this relationship. But I can't. It's healthy for me and for them to talk about it. And then I may need to set some healthy boundaries. I may not be able to actually be in this relationship with this person anymore. Or I may continue to stay connected to them. I may stay in that relationship, but there may be some boundaries that I set up as a part of that relationship. When we're talking about setting boundaries, we're talking about I'm defining for myself what I am comfortable with and how I want to be treated. And again, maybe that's part of the communication. Maybe that's part of the conversation that I have with this person. That here's how I'm going to have to be in this relationship from now on. Here's what our interaction is going to need to be like, at least for a while, because of what's been happening in the past. But it's me choosing to recognize what kinds of interactions that particular person it causes me to feel bad about myself, and then choosing to keep myself from being put in those situations. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 12, Paul says this, everything is permissible for me, but not everything is beneficial. Everything is permissible for me, but I will not be mastered by anything. And in the context that he's talking about, he's quoting the people in the church that he's writing to who are saying, well, I got permission to do whatever I want. I can say what I want. I can go where I want. I can do anything that I want because I'm a Christian and Jesus forgives me anyway. And he says, well, that might be true. That might not be beneficial. And he says you might even want to get into some different habits because you think, well, it's no big deal because Christ is going to forgive me. I've got grace and it's no problem. And Paul says that doesn't need to be the case because you can be mastered by whatever those things are that you're going to dabble in. Now, I'm not going to be mastered by anything. And I share that verse with you this morning because I think some of us allow ourselves to be mastered by the negative comments and the negative feelings that this other person is producing in us. We allow ourselves to be mastered by the picture that they create of us, and it becomes part of our self-esteem and how we view ourselves. And I need to set some boundaries. I need to keep myself from being put in those hurtful situations so that I am not mastered by their negative perception of me, which becomes my negative perception of me. I'm not going to allow myself to be controlled by the hurt. I'm not going to allow myself to be controlled by the negative perception I have of myself. So we may just need to change this connection. We may need to be done with this relationship. But I need to put some healthy boundaries in place. So I'm not allowing myself to be mastered and controlled by the hurt anymore. Another thing that I need to do is resist the temptation to retaliate. Resist the temptation to retaliate. I need to resist the urge for payback. I need to keep from buying into the concept that they deserve for me to treat them the way they have been treating me. To say to them the same kind of things they say to me. To do to them the same kind of things that they have done to me. They make me feel bad? Fine, I'm going to make them feel bad. They say awful things to me? I'm going to say awful things to them. They say awful things about me to other people? You're not going to believe what I'm going to say about them. And we have this desire, we have this urge, and it's such an easy trap for us to fall into. Satan convinces us that we have every right to do that. That they deserve for us to treat them that way because of how they have treated us, because of the things that they have said to us. But there's some problems with that. The first thing is, I never get even with my retaliation. Anytime that I try to get back at someone, anytime that I try to pay back someone what they did to me, I always go a step further. I always make it worse, which makes them retaliate back, which makes me retaliate back, and it keeps escalating from there. I never get completely even. I run the risk of feeling worse than I already do because now I feel guilty. I already feel bad because of how they treated me, and then I try to retaliate, and then I feel even worse because now I feel guilty for trying to retaliate. And above all things, this is not the heart or the actions that God calls us to. But some of us have a skewed perception of what Jesus says in Luke chapter 6, what we commonly refer to as the golden rule. In Luke 6, verse 31, do to others as they do to you. Do to others as they did to you. Check your Bibles, check your Bible apps. That's not correct. Okay? But that's how we read it. That's the lens that we view that verse through on a regular basis. They did something to me, so I'm going to do something to them. They said something to me, so I'm going to say something to them. They made me feel bad about myself. I'm going to figure out a way to make them feel bad too. Do to others what they did to you. It's not what it says. What does it actually say? Do unto others as you would have them do to you. I want to treat this person the way I wish that they would have treated me, even if they didn't treat me that way. I want to treat this person the way they need to be treated, even if they don't treat me that way. That's what we're called to. That's the kind of heart we're supposed to have. That's the kind of attitude we're supposed to long for and try to implement in our lives. Those are the kind of actions we're supposed to take. I'm not going to pay you back in the same way that you paid me. I'm not going to make negative comments. I'm not going to try to make you feel bad or feel guilty or hurt your self-esteem. Even if you never do that for me, I'm not going to do that to you. I want to treat you with grace and compassion and love. Even if you don't deserve it. Why? Because you need it. And that's what God calls me to. I want to give people what they need, not what they deserve. That's what He does for me. And that's what I need to do for others. We have these red flags, these warning signs that this person that I'm in this relationship with, this friend of mine, this person that I'm dating, my spouse, my sibling, whoever that person is consistently making me feel bad about myself. That's a problem. It needs to be addressed. And as a part of doing that, I need to remember, first of all, my value, my God-given value. I need to communicate with them how they're making me feel. I need to set some boundaries. And I need to resist the urge to get even. That'll help. I'm not saying it'll cure everything. I'm not saying it's an immediate fix. But if I will commit to these steps in this relationship, it's going to help. It's going to help that relationship be healthy, or it's going to provide me a healthy way to walk away from that relationship. But it's also going to help me continue to recognize who I am in a positive way and recognize my value to my God and live my life through that lens instead of how this other person views me. I need to wrap up. This week I've been trying to think of a story to kind of demonstrate what it looks like when we are being hurt by other people in regards to our self-esteem. And the story that I kept coming back to over and over is the story of Zacchaeus. And we've talked about it before again in this church family, but it's in Luke chapter 19. We're not going to read it verse by verse, but you can look it up if you want to. In the book of Luke in chapter 19, there's this guy named Zacchaeus, and he is a tax collector. He is a tax collector for the Roman government living in the middle of a Jewish society. So automatically, all of his fellow Jewish neighbors and friends hate him because he's collecting taxes for the oppressive Romans who have taken over the land of the Jewish people. They already can't stand the guy for that reason. We also find out that Zacchaeus is short. We don't know how short, because I don't think the people that lived back in that time were just all that tall. But he was even shorter than that. So you got a guy who is already hated because of his job, and he's already short. What kind of comments do you think he got? How do you think people treated him? Probably pretty negatively. You can only imagine the kind of comments that people made to him about his job and about the money he was collecting, and the kind of comments that they made about his height and how much they made fun of him. And you can only imagine the kind of impact that had on Zacchaeus. My guess is Zacchaeus probably retaliated. Matter of fact, I know he did in one way. He overcharged people their taxes. He cheated them. He lied to them. He stole from them. And profited from that. Probably built a big house for himself, collected a whole bunch of money that didn't belong to him, but he got to keep it anyway because he was working for the Roman government and nobody can do anything about it. That'll show him. Don't you know the comments got worse? Don't you know that the way that he got treated got even worse? People just didn't like him. They said awful things about him. They said awful things to him. They never invited him into their homes. They never had anything to do with him. I mean, Zacchaeus is living a life filled with just negative thoughts about who he was, about his own value. And he tried to increase his own value in his own mind, his own self-esteem in his own mind by gaining more wealth, by gaining more power, by mistreating people and showing his power over them, flexing his muscles over them. They're going to make fun of his height. He's going to show how big he really is. He's going to charge them even more taxes. He's going to get them in trouble. He's going to report them to the soldiers and say they didn't pay their taxes. There's all sorts of ways that Zacchaeus probably retaliated against these people because he felt bad about himself. And here's this guy Jesus is coming. And this guy Jesus is saying all these amazing things. He's performing these miracles. And he's connecting with kind of the lowlifes in society. I mean, he's even talking to other tax collectors from what I heard. He's interacting with them. And he's healing people that you shouldn't even be around. He's eating supper with sinners. And man, I want to see this guy. And Jesus is coming to town. And I want to see him. But Zacchaeus has such a negative concept of himself that he doesn't want to be in the crowd with everybody else when Jesus comes by. So what does he do? Climbs up in a tree with really big, thick leaves so nobody can see him. Because he just wants to see Jesus. He doesn't want to hear comments from the people in the crowd. What are you doing here, Zacchaeus? You don't deserve to be here. Go home. Nobody wants you here anyway. Hey, shorty. Hey, shrimp. Need a front row seat? Because you can't see over any of us, can you? And all the negative things that Zacchaeus feels about himself, he doesn't want to experience it. He's already experienced it from all these people. He doesn't want to experience it in that moment. And Jesus comes walking by while he's hiding in the tree. And he sees him. It's Jesus. It's this guy that they've been talking about. And all of a sudden, Jesus stops. Oh, no. I got to be real still and real quiet. And then Jesus looks up in the tree. Oh, no. He's looking up here. And then Jesus is pointing and calling him by name. Zacchaeus. Can't you imagine the crowd? Zacchaeus. Oh, my gosh. Don't you know the comments just started flying? Look at him up there in the tree. That's the tallest he's ever been. That's the highest height he's ever reached. And just all the comments would come. You might as well stay up in that tree. Don't come down here with the rest of us. And I mean, just everything that Zacchaeus felt about himself was now in the spotlight because Jesus points him out. But then what does Jesus do? He says, Zacchaeus, come down. I want to go to your house. Now, if the rabbi comes to town, it was a huge honor in the eyes of the rest of the town for the rabbi to go eat at whoever's house he chose to eat at. And Jesus, in that moment, tears away all this negativity, all the negative comments, all the negative physical features, all the failures, all the hurts that he's caused other people, all the ways they've retaliated against him, all the hate that he feels, all the anger that he feels, all the sorrow that he feels, and the guilt that he feels. Jesus peels through all that and says, I I value you. I want to eat with you. I want us to be connected. Can you imagine how quickly he jumped down out of that tree? A man who probably didn't feel like he deserved to be there in the first place. Now gets this one-on-one interaction with Jesus. Because Jesus gave him value. Jesus helped him feel loved. And after that, Zacchaeus decides he's going to try to make other people feel as good as Jesus made him feel. He seeks forgiveness for all the people that he's hurt. He promises to take all the money that he's ripped off of people and give it back. As a matter of fact, pay them more than what he took from them. And in just a moment of Jesus helping Zacchaeus see himself through Jesus' eyes, it completely changed his life. And the reason I'm wrapping up with that story this morning, I am wrapping up, is because, first of all, I want any of us who are sitting in this room this morning, who are watching online right now, to know, if you never knew or if you forgot, I want you to know how precious you are to my Savior. I want you to know that to be true. Even if you're not sure that you actually believe in him, you are precious to him. Even if you feel like you don't deserve to be seen as someone who is precious and valuable, you are so worth it to him. But I also want you to know you have the opportunity, because you recognize your worth in his eyes, and because you recognize in somebody else's eyes, a family member, a coworker, spouse, child, how desperately that person needs to feel valued as well. You have the opportunity to change someone else's life today. So here in just a second, we're going to stand together and we're going to sing a song. And it's an invitation. It's an opportunity. If you are feeling right now in this moment like you're just full of guilt, less valuable, feeling bad about yourself because of your own mistakes or because of what other people have said to you or about you, you're welcome to come forward and share that with us this morning. Just come forward and share. Just as you are right now, this is who I am, and I need help to see myself through his eyes. I need forgiveness. I need grace. I need acceptance. We will help you find that and discover that today, this morning, right now. But I also want to challenge you to find opportunities, and maybe you need to start with the people that you're already connected to. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it's a spouse. You need to start today changing their lives, helping them see themselves through the eyes of Jesus by the way you talk to them, by the way you treat them. And if we can help with that, we want to as well. If you have any need in your heart this morning, please be willing to come share that with us. Just walk to the front, share it with us while together we stand and sing.
Just